Welcome to foam rolling for the shoulders. Today we're going to go over the 5 main areas that you want to focus on for soft tissue release when trying to open up the shoulders. What you're going to need is a foam roller. So I'm using a Hyperice Viper. We're not going to use any of the vibration features that this has, so all you need is your standard foam roller. All right, well, let's get into it. We're going to start first on our lats. So our lats are the big muscle that run down the side of our body and a lot of times are a primary suspect when limiting that overhead range of motion. So we're going to start on our side, whichever side you want to start with, and we're going to get right underneath that shoulder blade. You don't want to be too far forward so you're not on your ribs, and you want to stay right in that soft tissue area right underneath that shoulder blade first. So as you notice some tender spots, we're just going to stay right there and breathe and just kind of scanning the area to figure out what parts are bothering you. So for me, I have a little tight spot right here, and I'm just going to allow my body to drop a little deeper onto that tissue and just focus on my breathing. You want to take about 5 to 10 deep breaths, depending on how tender it is through that area, and really focus on allowing your body to let that tension go. It's really easy when we're on those painful spots to just hold that tension in and not focus on our breathing. We end up holding our breath and not actually relaxing onto the roller, which pretty much defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do here. We're not going to change any structures. We're not looking to permanently fix anything. We're trying to relieve tension in the muscles to allow the muscles to move with a little bit more freedom once we get into our active range of motion work. So just scanning the area, you can go all the way up to even underneath that armpit and just finding that entire tissue area that might be causing you some trouble. If you want to ramp it up a level, if this feels pretty good and you're getting the hang of it, what you can do is you can find a tender spot, take a couple breaths, and then give yourself about 10 reps of lifting this arm up off of the roller. This is going to act like a pin and stretch technique that a lot of manual therapists, like physical therapists or chiropractors do, that is going to help that muscle release a little bit further. Getting that motion while we're on those tender areas helps to calm down that nervous system and open that tissue up even more. Spend about 3 to 5 minutes on each side and just keep scanning that area for those tender spots. Go. The next one we're going to get into is the pecs. So the pecs are the muscle in the front. A lot of times if you're sitting all day or if you just have a pretty traditional workout plan where you're doing any sort of chest day or bench press work, a lot of times we hold tension in the front of these shoulders. That can pull the shoulders forward and really restrict that range of motion overhead or out to the side. So for this one, we're going to need to be on our stomach. So we'll be laying on our stomach. We're going to place this roller right into the crease where our shoulder meets our chest. And you're going to notice pretty quickly if you're tender here or not, just as soon as that roller touches. So you're going to do the same thing. You want to scan the area first, find those tender spots. Usually say if it doesn't hurt, you're not doing enough, you're not on the right spot. So finding that nice spot right there, same thing, take about 5 to 10 deep breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth, trying to down-regulate that nervous system, and just breathing right there. For this one, we're actually going to go to 2 areas. So we're going to go from this chest and we're going to go down to the bicep as well. But we're just going to first focus on the chest. So like I said, just kind of scanning the area, working that tissue. When you find those really tender spots and you've done your 5 to 10 deep breaths, you're going to do the same thing like we did on the lat. We're going to create a little pin and stretch technique, creating some movement through that muscle as we're working that tissue. So we're going to stop on that area, take a good breath. We're going to do a couple lifts, trying to open that tissue up. That pressure on the tissue, that tender tissue in the front, a lot of times will allow you to activate the back of the shoulder muscles even more, because we're relieving that pressure off that front. After about 2 to 3 minutes right there, you can go ahead and slide down to the bicep. We're going to stay in the same position. It's a pretty quick transition. Thumb is going to be down towards the ground, bicep right on that foam roller, and we're just going to be taking this roller out to the side. Same thing, I always do a little scan first, and then when you find a nice spot, stay on that spot and breathe. Because the bicep is the entire front of that arm, you can even roll more forward, roll more back. Everybody's going to need something a little different. We all hold tension a little differently, but it's just finding the spots that hurt on you. You know, it's like I said, you don't want to be on the spots that don't hurt. Those aren't the problem areas. We want to be on those areas that are a little more painful, that are going to help create some relief in that muscle group, because they're tight for a reason, right? So we want to make sure we're giving those areas a little more attention, because those are the areas that are holding the tension and probably compensating the most. After about 2 to 3 minutes there, switch sides and do the same thing. For the sake of time, we're just going to go ahead and move on to the next one. The next one we're going to do is our delts. Our delts are the outside shoulder muscle right here. A lot of times they will limit that overhead range of motion as well, because everything is tight here, pulling forward. They kind of blend into the pecs. Same thing from that posture, kind of rounded forward, creates a lot of tension through there. And if the delts aren't moving as free as they need to, it's going to restrict that range of motion through that shoulder. So how we're going to set this up, we're going to start on the hands and knees actually, and you're going to have this roller to the outside. I'm going to show on both sides, because that way you can see kind of the angle I want you to take to this. So however you can position yourself to sit back, you're going to take your arm, and we're almost going to do like a thread the needle stretch, if you know what that is, and we're going to put that shoulder right on the middle of this foam roller. So we're going to go right here, and just like this, we're just going to, same thing, scan that area, work through that tissue, find those tender spots, and kind of rock back and forth as well. And just breathe on that area. We're not going to add any movement to this one, because we're already in a position that it's pretty difficult anyway. So we're just going to work on softening that tissue up. So for me, I got a nice spot right here. So I'm going to make sure I'm taking the time to just take a couple deep breaths and just work through that tissue. This soft tissue work is really important to keep those tissues moving healthily and to help to reduce the amount of compensation patterns that can happen as we move about, sustain some injuries, or have some hard workouts. Those tissues are supposed to glide across one another, and when they can't glide, they get stuck. When they get stuck, things don't move right. Things don't move right, things compensate. So it's just a chain of events that can happen. There we go. After about 2 to 3 minutes there, like I said, I'll show you from the other side as well. So how it looks from this side is I'm reaching through, like I said, shoulder goes on, and we're just working through that tissue. Make sure you're finding that all sides of that delt. The delt's comprised of 3 different sides: front, middle, and rear. You want to make sure you're checking all of them to make sure you're not tighter on one spot more than the other. For the next one, we're going to move into our tricep roll. So tricep and rear delts, they kind of blend together. We're going to hit both of them right here. It's almost the same setup as the lats, so we're going to be on our side. We're just going to have the roller in a little different position. We're going to be more on the back of the arm. We're not going to be down lower. So we want to stay up in the back of that arm, and we're going to take it all the way from where that elbow is to the back of the shoulder. So like I said, same thing, same setup as the lat. So you're going to have this arm out straight. I usually like to set up in kind of this staggered stance. If that's too difficult, you can stay in your full side position. And same thing, we're just going to scan that area, working through there, finding those tender spots. With this one, we are in a good position to do a pin and stretch technique, so we will add that to that as well. So for me, I got a nice tender spot right here. I'm gonna focus on my breathing. Big breath. Exhale, do that about 5 to 10 times. After those breaths, what we're gonna do, we're gonna try to bend that elbow as much as we can. I like trying to take it behind the head and using my head as a way to stretch it even more. Most people can't get their arm even that far at first. That's fine. Just take it to wherever you can. Your arm might even end up in front of your face. That's completely fine. Whichever one works for you. Everybody's body is different. So wherever you're holding the tension, focus on those areas the most. Make sure you're taking it all the way up into that armpit and giving your body a little roll back and forth. That's going to hit more of that rear delt shoulder tissue, right where that tricep and shoulder meet. That's an area that tends to get a lot of stagnant tissue. It's really junky through there because if we're rounded forward, that tissue's in a constantly lengthened state, trying to work extra hard. And when we're doing certain movements, that tissue is really important to stabilize the shoulder. Just working through that. Same thing, about 2 to 3 minutes. Work right there. And then we're gonna move on to the next spot. The last one is a roll for the upper back and shoulder blades. The goal here is to loosen up the tissue between the shoulder blades and even add some extension through that upper back as well. That limited extension through our upper back will limit our shoulder blade and shoulder mobility, which will then create another compensation patterns that happen through our movements. So what we're gonna do here, pretty basic setup, setting it on the ground, putting ourselves right on top of it. I like to start lower in that mid back, that way kind of gives me an idea where I need to go up or down, because you can go a little bit lower. I don't really want you to go on the lower back. A lot of times that can be a little too painful, too much weight on that lower back immediately. So we're gonna stay more on the upper back. So hands behind the head, I want you to be able to relax the neck. If we're just holding tension in our neck, that kind of defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do. So hands behind the head, nice big breath. We're gonna take that roll all the way up and down, nice and slow. Like I said, we're just gonna do a scan first, finding where you're tight. So I notice for me, I'm about right there is where I get tight. So when I am rolling, finding the spots, my butt is gonna be off the ground. But when I want to add some of that movement to this, which we're gonna do, we're gonna find that spot. You're gonna let your butt sink to the ground, and I want you to try to allow your head to sink as far to the ground, your elbows to open up as much as possible. We're gonna change our elbow position a couple times. So here, trying to let that open up, hitting a couple reps right here. Make sure you're breathing. It's gonna be pretty tender. If you're on the right spot, you can do some slight rocks or in that deeper range. You can also do the same thing on the same spot, and all you do is bring your elbows together, and that completely changes how that feels as you extend, because it changes the position of our shoulder blades and actually allows for our shoulder blades to move out and us to hit a little bit more tissue around the inside of the shoulder blade. Same thing, a lot of you are going to be tight in those upper traps, so go ahead and make sure you're hitting those upper traps with this as well. If you find it's really tight, you can even add some overhead reaches here. So this, you are going to have to hold your head up, and you're just going to allow this look up to the ceiling, allow everything to drop back. It might not even get back to the floor. That's completely fine. That is the goal. But I don't expect everyone to be able to do this right in the beginning. We're just trying to help start to loosen up that tissue. Get everything moving through there. Spin about, same thing. I like a little bit longer on these areas. These are areas that tend to be a little more painful or a little more restricted. So spend 3 to 5 minutes on this area. And just keep giving yourself time to sink into those areas and keep scanning around where they might be. You might get some pops through there. That's completely fine, completely normal. And there you have it. That's foam rolling for the shoulders. Make sure that you're doing everything on both sides. Make sure you're focusing on your breathing, and make sure you're giving yourself enough time on the area to actually allow it to do what it needs to do. This is an even better routine when followed up with some mobility. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and head back to the website. There's a 4-week mobility plan on there, and it'll go great in conjunction with this soft tissue work as well. Thanks, guys.